Imagine you build a beautiful interface where we have input field, buttons and rest of the other thing. But on the user action like clicking on the button or moving from one field to another, nothing is happening on it. Definitely it's going to be very boring. And the reason for that is there is no interaction taking place. This is where standard component events comes into practice. These are built-in events provided in Salesforce with help of which we can certainly listen to different actions done by the user on the interface and then handle those actions accordingly. In fact, this is giving life to the user interface. And above all, we need not to do anything from the scratch. So in this video, we are going to talk about standard component events and we will see how to make our form interactive. So without wasting any time further, let's proceed with the video. First things first, what are standard component events? So basically these are built-in events which are provided by LWC for common actions. These actions are nothing but user actions taken on the user interface. That can be clicking on a button or moving from one field to another. So with the help of standard component events, we can actually simplify interaction between various components and which will actually enhance the user experience. Some examples of standard component events are change, click, blur, and submit. Now the question comes, why use standard events? So basically, standard events are predefined and hence are easy to use. We need not to do any custom event creation. For example, it works completely fine with the base components like lightning button or lightning input. And hence it helps to enhance interactivity with minimal effort. Some examples over here are, like you can see, click, change, submit events are there. For example, click event, it is basically fired on the button click and hence it is basically used with the lightning button tag. Similarly, change triggers on input value change. Suppose the user is typing in an input box. And similarly, submit button, which is fired when a form is submitted. Now, how to use standard events? So to use a standard event, we basically add an event listener. This is something which actually listens when that specific event happens. For example, the standard event click. So we can add a listener on the click event on a button. So it will listen when a certain click is happening and it will tell, okay, now click happened and now we can handle that specific event. Now how to add the listener? We use on prefix on the event. So that will be actually the listener. For example, if we talk about the click event and we want to add click event listener on the button, so we will add on click attribute and then after within curly bracket we will specify the handler. Now this handler will be nothing but a method. So we will specify the method which will actually be executed as and when that specific event happens. Now we will define the handler in the JavaScript file. So this handler will be nothing but a method inside our JavaScript file and that specific method will be executed when that specific event will happen. So the process is very simple. We add a listener for a specific event on a specific component. So the listener will listen when that specific event will happen and this listener will actually call that handler at that specific event happening. So if the click event will happen on this specific button, then the handle click method will be called and some text will be written on the console. Now some commonly used standard events are click event, which is triggered by buttons, checkboxes, etc. Change event, which fires when an input's value changes. Blur event, which fires when an input loses focus. For example, you move from one text box to another. So the first text box will have this blur event. Submit, which is triggered when a form is submitted. And key down, which is fired when a key is pressed. Now we have talked enough about event listening and handling about the standard component events. But now it's time to see the things practically. So let's quickly move on to our VS Code. So here we are in our VS Code. In the LWC folder, I am going to create a new Lightning Web component. So I will right click on LWC folder and click on create lightning component. If you are not able to see something like that, what you can do is you can open the command palette, which is Ctrl Shift P, if you are on Windows, and Command Shift P if you are on Mac, and you can directly type here create lightning web component. So you can see sfdx create lightning web component. Now you can specify the name of your LWC. So right now I am naming it as standard component event or standard events, and I will choose the folder which is the LWC folder. So here you can see my LWC is there. I will directly go to the JS. I will mention here true in the is exposed, and then after I need targets and target. So I will just simply type target. It will show me something like LWC target. I will click on it and it will add the targets and specific targeted location. I just need app page and rest I will delete from here. Now in the HTML part, I need to add some components. So let me quickly add few input fields and button over here so that we can add some standard component events. Okay, so you can clearly see here I have created a lightning layout with some lightning layout item, two text box in fact, full name, one email, and two buttons here. So I am making both of them as brand, or in fact I am making one of them as variant as brand and the other variant as neutral. I guess neutral or neutral, something like that. Let me use neutral for now. I basically not sure whether neutral is there or not, but we will come to know. Let's go for the base to be sure for it. And here I will have one button as add, or let's name it as submit, and the other one as, let's name it as cancel. Okay, so let me quickly deploy this. So it is deployed. Now we can certainly go to our org. Here in our org, I am going to the page editor in the Lightning app builder, and here I am just refreshing it. Now I am collapsing the standard and I can find my standard events LWC as well. And now I am just saving it, going back to the page and refreshing it. Now you can see these buttons are there, but on clicking on it nothing is happening. Even when I am typing here, nothing is happening. Now we have to decide what we want to do, like what should happen when we are doing these events or when the user are doing these events. So right now what I want is I will print on the console. So whatever you are printing on the console, you can actually find on the inspect window. On the inspect window, come to this console tab and you can click on this clear console button. So everything will be cleared here, and you can actually find out on the event. You can print something over here. Okay, so right now what we will do, we will actually just print things over here to understand how events are happening. Okay, so first of all we will deal with this text box. So whenever anything is getting typed here, something should happen. Okay, so we will listen to this. Now the event over here is change, so we will have an onChange listener, right? So let's go to the VS Code. On the email we will have an onChange, and then here within curly brackets we will mention a handler name. So I'm just mentioning it as handle onChange, but that will not be all. We have just defined that this is the listener for change event, and this is calling this specific method or this specific handler. Now we have to define this method. Now where to define it? In the JS. So we'll go to the JS part, and within the curly braces of our class I will just add this method or function. Okay, so this function will be called when that specific event will happen. So to make it possible or to actually show it to us, I am adding a console log over here, and I am just simply mentioning as email is changing. I'm saving it and I'm deploying it. Let's go back to our org. So I'm right clicking on the refresh and doing empty cache and hard reload. Now I'm clearing this console, clicking on this email, and I'm typing some. But you can see as soon as I'm typing something over here, here you can see email is changing, is printing on the console log, and you can see it is printing 16 in front of it, right? So this is actually listening to the specific event and something is happening over there. So instead of console log, you can even show the alert. Okay, but what if I want to take this value and do something? Okay, so how can I get this value which the user is entering? For that, every listener passes an object to the handler. So let's see that. That specific object is passed here in the handler. You can name it anything, but to make it easier to understand, we actually name it event, or you can simply name it E whatsoever. Now let's print this value of E. So here I am doing console.log and printing the value if E. Now E is nothing but a JavaScript object. Okay, it's an object. You know, in JavaScript there is objects. You have already studied about it. In my HTML CSS JavaScript course also we might have already covered, or maybe we yet have to cover about it. So it is nothing but a JavaScript object, and that is something that we are printing right over here. So now let's go back to the org after deploying it and see what it is printing. Now again I will do empty cache and hard reload, and here I am just typing a single character Z or Z. But as soon as I typed it, here you can see this is the object. Now actually this is specific object which is passed to the handler whenever user is actually performing an event, and that specific event is having a handler. Now this handler contains plenty of information, and out of that, if you see the detail part, so basically the object E is having a detail object inside it, and that detail object is having a value attribute. So we can actually get this value. Okay, let me type one more thing, or let me type in fact my name, and if I see the last one, because whenever I'm typing AMIT, every time event is happening and every time it is calling the handler. So at the last time when it is calling it, you can see in the detail part the value is containing Amit, right? So basically whenever an event happens, the event object is passed from the listener to the handler, and with the help of that event object we can get information, various information about that specific event. Now to know the value of it, whatsoever the user has entered, we just need to call the detail object of the event object and then the value property. So event.detail.value. So here, if instead of console.log, I will just simply do alert, and inside that e.detail.value, so I'm actually displaying it on a dialog box, or a kind of message box that is displayed over there. So let me again open the inspect, empty cache and hard reload, and here I am typing. So you see, first time I typed A and the alert box is in front of me and showing A over there. Then I'm typing M, it is showing AM over there. So basically whatsoever I'm typing in the text box, it is working perfectly. Now let's talk about another event, blur event. So what I want is, as soon as I am typing anything, or I should say as soon as I am leaving this full name text box, okay, it should actually check whether it is empty or not. If it is empty, it should show a warning on the alert, right? Okay, so right now you can see in the HTML file I'm going to add an onBlur and having a handler as handle blur. Now just need to create this handle blur in the JS. Here I'm naming it the E object or event object, and again instead of alert I'm using console.log and I'm printing E, and I'm actually moving this also in the console.log. Basically in LWC we don't use alert box because LWC has its own modal dialog, so we won't bother about the JavaScript alert. But for our learning, our main focus is not alert, basically how to deal with event and how to handle it. So here what I'm doing it is I'm just printing the E, the event object, as soon as I'm leaving the focus from the full name text field. So let me deploy this. So basically here when I'm typing, let me just empty cache and hard reload again, type in something and click outside. So if you see here, this is something which does not contain detail. If you see, Here you won't find the detail part is null, but instead of that you will find a target. Though you won't be able to see the target over here, but in such component events where we get the target instead of detail, we get the value from the target itself. So here instead of e.detail.value, I will type e.target.value and it will certainly give me that value. So I will just deploy, and here I can actually empty cache and hard reload. If I type in something and click outside, you can see it is printing Amit. So that's how we actually deal with event. Now finally, on the click of submit, what I want is I want the value of both these objects, or I should say both these text fields to be printed. So as soon as submit is clicked, both these text field values should be printed over there. Now how to tackle such thing? To tackle such thing, we will take help of variables. So here in JavaScript, I am going to create two variables, one as full name and the other one as email. And what I'm doing is I'm going to have an onChange event on both of them. So instead of onBlur, I'm going to have an onChange and mention it as handle name change, and this one is as handle email change. And I will have both these handlers here, and this one as handle email change. And all that I need to do is I will just enter the value in these variables. Now remind you, these variables are class variables. So here I will use this keyword. So this dot full name is equals to e.detail.value. And the same thing I will do here, but this time for email. Now finally, on the button, I will have an onClick, and on this onClick, I will handle onClick method or handle submit. Now this handler I will create in the JS, and I will just call the alert here and show the full name as this dot full name, and one more alert where I am going to print email as this dot email. Saving this, deploying this. So now what will happen, whenever user will enter anything on those text boxes, that will be saved in these variables, and whenever the user will click on the submit button, value of these variables will be printed on the dialog box. So let me empty cache and hard reload. In full name, let me type it Amit Kumar. So here I have typed the values. Now I will click on submit, and here you can see full name is Amit Kumar, okay, email is amitpropertutorials@gmail.com. So basically, on the click of the button, these values in the variables is displayed over there. Now on the click of this cancel, I want these values to be removed. So of course, how you can do that, the very simple way to do that is again the use of the variable. Here I will come to the HTML part, and you know there is a value attribute for the text field. Whatsoever is in the value attribute will be displayed on the text field. So here I am using value attribute and printing the same variable. So you remember this variable I have created in the JavaScript. So the same variable I am printing here, and again value, and here I will print the email and save. And on the click of the cancel, so on click handle cancel, so on the click of the cancel, I will call this handler, which I am going to define now. And all that I will do is I will just erase the value from these variables. So I will make them blank. And this blank value will impact on the text field, and that will also become blank. So let's deploy and check it out. Now let me empty cache and hard reload. Let me enter something else. Let me click on submit. So these values is printing. You can see that. And on the click of the cancel, these are getting erased because I am removing the value from the variables itself, and that blank value is now value of these text fields. So that's how we deal with events, event listeners, and event handlers. Now, what are the best practices for standard events? So always use meaningful handler names like handle submit, handle input change, as you have seen in the practical session. Minimize business logic in event handlers and use separate methods if needed. Now in my case, right now we have created very simple program, and that's why our handler was very small. But if the handlers are very big and too much business logic is there, we remove the business logic to a new method and we just call that specific method in the handler, which we will definitely see in the next video. Test events thoroughly across devices and browsers. Always leverage event.target for dynamic input handling, as I have shown you there. Basically event.detail is very useful, but whenever we are talking about dynamic handling like focus in and focus out, basically event.target is very handy over there. Where can standard events help? These are some examples. For example, if we are capturing user input and displaying dynamic data, if you are working on form submission with validation so that you can validate before the form is getting submitted, or if you are working on button clicks triggering data retrieval or actions. Common mistakes to avoid: forgetting to validate input on submit events. So when we are submitting events or when we are dealing with submit events, it's always a best practice to validate all the input values given by the user so that you can deal with validated data. Overwriting the default event behavior unnecessarily. So there is always a default behavior of all the events, and if you are overwriting them, now this privilege of overwriting default behavior is given to us. We can use a prevent default method. I will tell you about that later on. But with the help of that, we can override the default behavior. But we do that only on specific and unique cases, right? It's not like you do it every time. So if you do that, then definitely the default behavior will be overridden and you will find something that you don't want the form to do. Adding unnecessary listeners leading to performance issues. Adding too much of listeners is also not good, because in that case your HTML or basically your design part or the UI is too much busy on listening on various of events. So basically have listeners to those events only which you want in the form to be dealt. If this video helped you anyway, then definitely don't forget to hit that like button. It will help me and the channel to grow and reach other trailblazers like you. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you will never miss a single update or a single lecture that we are publishing. If you got any questions, drop there in the comment. I'm going to answer them in form of a text or in form of a video as soon as possible. In the next lecture, or I should say in the next 2 lectures, we are going to deal with 2 projects in which we are going to talk about whatsoever we have learned till now in LWC and try to implement something practically which is real life based. That marks the end of this video. See you soon in the next video. Till then, thank you and take care.